I knew nothing about interest rate derivatives when I started, but it's a skill to know that you've got to have that ability to continuously learn throughout your career, to realize that the technology skills that you might start your career become obsolete and you've got to be prepared. What are the things that make somebody successful in the career? It's about that ability to continuously...
And a lot said about AI right now. Do you have any thoughts on how it might change the landscape of software talent?
It will not just change the sector in terms of how we're delivering the product, but then about how...
Welcome to Workplus, the podcast that shines a light on the people doing good work across Northern Ireland. I'm your host, Richard Kirk, founder of Workplus. I've spent years working with employers, schools, colleges and universities, helping young people and career changers to make better informed career decisions. Each week, I sit down with real people doing real jobs to explore how they got there, what they've learned, and why their work matters. If you're a parent, teacher, carer, or just curious about what good work looks like today, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Richard, thanks very much for inviting me to come along and actually to take part. I didn't have a direct route into software. Whenever I came through school, I can remember the careers master said, Healy, you're good at maths and physics, you'll be doing engineering. And sure, what did I know? I said, yes, sir, I'll do engineering. So that's what I went off and did. I should have known better. He was a Latin teacher, obviously tons of time on his timetable and they put in charge of careers and probably not the best equipped in terms of sending people out into the world. But anyway, I went off to Queen's. I did engineering. I absolutely hated it. I promised myself on my graduation day that I wasn't going to work a single day as an engineer. And here I am, like I graduated in 91. So what's that? 34 years ago.
Yeah.
To this day, I have not worked a single day as an engineer. What I did do is I circled right back in 91. They had started the conversion courses, the MSCs. Okay. They run them at both universities. They've proved to be really successful in terms of building skills for the sector, but I was one of the first cohorts through that. And I went back and did the MSc in computer science at Queen's, and that got me back onto the tracks, back onto probably what I maybe should have done from the get-go. And that got me launched on what has been a very successful career in software development.
Brilliant. Why was it computer science then? What was the thing that really grabbed you?
I've always been really interested, even when I was at school. Back in the 80s with the BBC Basics, I'd always been poking around at them. Through the engineering course, there was a bit of Fortran, a bit of computing in it, and I really quite enjoyed it. But for me, it was around bringing together a desire to get into business alongside kind of skills and capability that you could do with a computer.
Yes.
That really attracted me, solving problems.
So over that journey, you ended up then heading up Citi and ultimately Allstate here.
Yeah.
In those early days, did you have aspirations for that, or did that all just seem to happen incrementally?
So I did that conversion course, came out in 92, and here was just a wasteland in terms of job opportunities. You look at the landscape that we have today where employers are fighting with each other to get hold of graduates. Way back in the early 90s, and not so much so. You either got a job with BT or you didn't get a job. They were the employer of technology graduates at the time. I didn't get one of those jobs with BT, so I had to think, well, what am I going to do? And I was on the train going home from a Sunday lunch, as boys from Derry are wont to do. And I was reading the paper, I saw this job ad, and it was full of really exciting words, and I had to actually go to the library to look up half of the words that were in it, because it was a job ad for an investment bank. I had never even heard of an investment bank. I had no idea what they did, and I went up into the stacks in the library at Queen's to look up these financial terms, and I thought, I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah.
And I did. I put my application in. I went across to London. I did the interview and got the job, and that got me started in what today people would call a career in fintech. But back then it was just a job in technology in a bank. And my first job was on the trading floor of JP Morgan, the investment bank, American investment bank. And I was doing the IT support for the traders for interest rate derivatives. And it was just hugely exciting, really complex problems that I was able to bring my computer skills, my software skills to bear on. And launched me on a career that took me around the globe, that gave me just such a grounding in technology and the power of technology to solve real problems.
You mentioned IT support. So if we think IT support, we might think, oh, that's someone fixing laptops or whatever. But what was it you were actually doing on a day-to-day basis to help those traders then?
So it was interest rate derivatives. So these guys were buying and selling money, essentially, with their clients, with other banks. And then they had to load those trades, those positions into the technology. They had to be priced every night. You needed to connect the way back in, this is like 92, 93. It's not computing like we know today. These guys were running on standalone computers. That were making calls off to a mainframe to price things one at a time, not the big networks and the cloud and the big processing power and the big storage power that people are so used to today. So it was really just around helping the traders to understand how the technology worked, to be able to fix the problems that invariably cropped up, to be the person who was translating the problems that the traders on the floor were having back to the developers of the software, and then working with them in terms of actually getting the thing priced, understanding the risk that the bank was having, and then essentially going home, getting back into the trading floor for 7 and cracking on and doing it all again. I just absolutely loved it. From that support job, moved into the software and onto the development side, and I actually ended up with JP Morgan in a nearshore development center that they have in Glasgow. I was running their cash equity trading platform. So essentially, by the time I finished, that was the platform that they were using to buy and sell stocks and shares on all the global exchanges around the world. So hugely exciting, and I just loved it. It was a real ride.
Yeah, great. And we thought a bit about your qualifications that got you to that point. So you're growing up in Derry, going to school, got your engineering degree, got your MSc in computer science. But what are those skills that are needed to do that job rather than just the qualification?
It is absolutely not just the bit of paper that you get from a school, college, or university institution. That may well be the bit that opens the door, that allows you to step through. But building a career, having a successful career, is about so much more. It's about the skills that maybe you don't even realize that you're gathering on the way through, the ability to communicate, get your ideas across, the skills around being able to work in a team and understand your role in the team, be it as a team member, a team leader, an influencer, whatever role you have within that team, and then just an ability to continuously learn. Like, I knew nothing about interest rate derivatives when I started. I knew nothing about the intricacies of buying and selling stocks and shares. Knew nothing about anything whenever you come through. But it's there's the skill to know that you've got to have that ability to continuously learn throughout your career, to realize that the technology skills that you might start your career become obsolete, and you've got to be prepared, willing and able to continually refresh your tech skills, take on new knowledge the whole way through your career. And that's no different even today at this position in my career than it was 30 odd years ago whenever I was starting out.
So you ended up then progressing through JP Morgan, working in Glasgow. How did then you make the journey to heading up Citi here in Northern Ireland? How did that all come about? Those aren't things that you plan as an 18-year-old, but how did that all come about?
Yeah, so I do. I think I've got a podcast of my own out there, and people keep saying, well, stop talking about it and just get on and do it. A podcast and a book And I talk about leadership in 8 words, 8 key lessons that I've learned along my life. And one of those lessons is about balance, because while I was having, this super career, and it really was, like I was at the top of my game in JP Morgan. I was running that group in Glasgow. I was back living here in Northern Ireland. We'd just had our third kid. But I was flying over to Glasgow on a Monday morning from here. I know a very early adopter of telecommuting. I was supposed to work from home on a Wednesday, but so I'd fly home on a Tuesday. But more often than not, I'd fly up and down to the trading floor in London on a Wednesday, and then I'd fly back to Glasgow on a Thursday, home on a Friday, weekend reset, over to Glasgow on a Monday. And I can remember I woke up in a hotel in Glasgow and I thought, flip me, what's happening in my life? One dimension absolutely flying in terms of the career satisfaction and everything that comes with that. But also realizing that whenever you're dead and gone, there's not a single person from JP Morgan's going to be standing at my graveside. It's your friends and family that are really important. And I went in to work that day and I resigned.
Really?
Yeah. So this thing that had been such a major part of me in terms of my career, my job satisfaction, 4 weeks later, it was like all over. And I came back and I took a job with Liberty. So Liberty had been one of the very early entrants into the tech sector here in Northern Ireland in fact, just before the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. They were here and well established by that stage, and I got a job with them. And it was a super company, and my manager, a real giant in the tech sector in Northern Ireland, Willie Hamilton. I learned so much from him, lifelong friend and mentor. He realized that the job, and I realized that the job that I was doing wasn't the job that was right for me. And while I came back and I did that job at Liberty, I, within a year, was back out and I took on a role as the Chief Information Officer for the Grafton Group, a very large recruitment company, operated globally. And I went in there to rebuild their technology stack and get it ready for a capital event. And that was a super journey. I learned so much in doing that, because up to then all my career had been in a big corporate environment where, truthfully, if you put a good story together around a project, you got the funding to go off and do it. You're able to crack on and do some really interesting things. The difference whenever you're working for that kind of SME type company, and the two shareholders, James and Ken, reminded me of this all the time. Whenever I went to them with my latest, greatest idea around how technology could revolutionize their business, they'd remind me that I was spending their kids' inheritance. So I learned some very valuable lessons around financial discipline, working for that organization. The importance that technology should not be done just for technology's sake. But actually, technology as a very useful tool to sort those business problems and to make a difference. But you have to get that return on the investment that's made in technology.
Yeah.
So I was about a year into that journey with the guys, having a really good time, and Citi opened up here, and I thought, oh, my timing just couldn't be worse. If I'd only just waited, 12 more months, then I could have, glided into Citi and been there for the journey. But I'd joined Ken and James. I was enjoying what I was doing there as the Chief Information Officer, and I said, no, I'll let it pass. So, but 2 more years, so it was about 3 years into that role, and I'd watched Citi from afar, and by that stage they were maybe about 200 people within Citi. So 200 people in 2 years is a very impressive growth trajectory for any company. But I got the call from Citi and said, hey, we know what you did for JP Morgan in the centre in London. We've got this centre here. Would you be interested in coming and having a look at it. We're doing quite well, but our attrition levels are starting to tick up, and we'd just be interested to see what maybe you think of it. So I did, and I went along, and 200 people, beautiful office down Queen's Island, down on the what was then the Science Park and is now Catalyst, and I could see pretty much straight away, what was happening there. This super brand had come into the market, had promised super technology jobs, had attracted all the top talent into the organization, but the quality of the jobs in behind hadn't really followed in behind. So a lot of dissatisfaction with all these really talented engineers who'd been recruited. And so they were cycling back out again going, oh, let me, I promised a great job there, but it's not what, did not living up to the mark. Yeah. So I could see that. And I said to them, look, here's my assessment. And they said, well, do you fancy coming and being part of maybe trying to fix that? And trying to stem the attrition and help to boost the growth of the organization. And I said, sure, why not? So they gave me a job, a made up job. They called me the business unit manager. And for the quick-witted among your audience, it's a very unfortunate acronym in that they took me on to be the Belfast bum, so I went to Citi and put together a slide deck that I took around the corridors of power in New York and in London around what needed to be done. And it's the same. Throughout my career, I've met a lot of inward investors to Northern Ireland and talked about the success of companies like Citi in terms of how they've managed to build and to grow to what they are today. And it's a very simple thing. Whenever these centres are built, there's great ambition around what you're going to do with them, but there's also great resistance within the organisations that they're being spun out from around, they're never going to be able to do those jobs over there. Sure, let's send them the low-level jobs. Let's send them the jobs that aren't that strategic or that important. And it really misses the point around what you get by building a tech centre here and that access to super talented, great engineers, full of real ideas around how things could be better. So instead of what was happening, which was getting all of the low-level jobs all disconnected, no two jobs the same. It was a very simple strategy that says instead of having 10% of everything, let's have 100% of something. Build a proper team, top to bottom, proper leadership, career paths for the engineers, a real sense of ownership in terms of the platforms out there. And really that transition from that kind of fragmented singleton type model to one that looked much more like a managed service provided the foundation for what then proved to be a hugely successful growth trajectory for that company. By the time I left, there were 2,000 Citi people that had grown it from 200 to 2,000. Subsequently, it's gone on to 4,000. It is like a real success story around what can be done in terms of building nearshore technology centres.
Yeah. And in terms of building that team, like you mentioned that you'd been in large institutions like JP Morgan, and then you had that time with Grafton, Ken and James, was it?
Ken and James.
Where you were spending their kids' inheritance. So were there aspects of that work that you learned in terms of how to pitch well, even within a large organization like Citi? Because presumably, as you said, you had to go with your slide deck. It's not just given that they were going to grow Belfast to 2,000 by the time you left and on to 4,000.
Definitely not. And for me, whenever I got asked, how would you define leadership, or what do you think is one of the key attributes in a great leader? For me, it is somebody who does have a vision for what the future could look like, and beyond that, be able to communicate that vision. Back to what gets you the job. It's not just the bit of paper that says you've done well academically, or that you've the ability to pass a test, but it's about being able to demonstrate those other attributes that are so essential in the workplace, and for leadership, that is about having a vision, and then importantly being able to communicate it. And that's what I've successfully been able to do, whether or not it is, for Grafton in terms of here's the architecture that's going to help you continue to be successful in your particular mission, or within JP Morgan or Citi or any other subsequent role. Here's the vision of what this place could be. Being able to go up and down the corridors of power in Citi and talk about what it might look like if we had a whole function sitting in Belfast, as opposed to all these singletons, disparate entities reporting into larger teams around the globe, and be able to let people see what that potential could be, and then importantly communicate what ultimately is everybody's, I always say it, everybody's favorite radio station, WII FM. What's in it for me? And if you're able, as you're putting together an idea for a business, for a product, for a project that you want to do, for what a tech center might be, you've got to be able to explain to the other side, well, what are they going to get out of it? How are they going to be able to reap the benefits? For Ken and James, it's around increasing their shareholder value. For Citi, it's around being able to deliver software better, faster, cheaper. If you're able to articulate what is, then you stand a chance of being successful.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of the makeup of the industry here, it's, as you mentioned, back to those days, maybe in the 90s, where it was BT or nothing. And then now we have a bustling, burgeoning tech sector here. In terms of the people that have come and joined in on that, you've been involved with the likes of Women in Business and Sisters In. You were there at the start of that. IT is often perceived as being a techie, people on laptops with their hoodies in a dark room. How can we dispel that sort of myth and maybe encourage more women into the sector?
Yeah, so women in technology, it has been a perennial problem in terms of that career attractiveness. And I go back to my own career's advice. Oh, Healy, you're good at maths and physics, you'll do engineering. Yes, sir. That's still all pervasive in terms of careers advice that's been given to our kids. Even today, all these years on, with a successful tech sector here, and it's not just about the tech sector, it's about the life and health sciences, it's about the green economy, it's about the advanced manufacturing that's here. That's not well understood in the wider society around how here really has transformed, and we do have to get better in terms of communicating about the success of our businesses here and the opportunities that there are for kids. So for technology, the girls are outperforming the boys at school. They're getting the grades to then go on and do the high tariff type courses, and that's what's being put up to them in schools by career services that says, hey, go off and do medicine, do law, do accountancy. Whereas I'd love it to be, do you know what, go do what you love. And for me at the time, it was about the idea of connecting technology to solving business problems. And I think that if we had a bit more of that for young women as they're coming through the different careers pathways, then we would do better in terms of then diverting that talent into our sector, because it isn't about scruffy boys sitting in darkened rooms with hoodies up, coding away. It is absolutely a team sport, where there are roles for absolutely everybody, from that deep coder type skills through to the interactions with the users, just as I did as I started off my career, as to how the traders were using that software on the trading floor. There's a whole gamut of roles in between. And it is such an exciting, such a dynamic sector that I'd love to see more people, full stop, coming into the sector, and more women in particular.
Yeah. And are there examples of your time either at Citi or Allstate that's worked out really well, that you've had those interventions with schools or with community groups or Sisters In, for example, that have really landed that message? Like how do we get that message out there? You said it's not well understood. How do we change that?
So I was lucky, so I moved on from Citi, went into Allstate, and had a successful career. Another big American firm with a nearshore technology center, and in both those roles at Citi and Allstate, I had access to super resources, true financial resources to be able to get out there and to make a difference, and to be able to engage with schools, engage with wider community, to be able to try and make an impact in terms of economic development right across the wider society out there. But it's very difficult whenever you're trying to do it just by yourself, trying to get like-minded business leaders to come along and aggregate that kind of financial resource to be able to make that impact. And there were some great leaders out there. I talked about Willie as somebody who is a real titan in terms of the build out of the sector. He really got it in terms of working in collaboration, not thinking, you're a competitor for talent, but yes, if we work together, maybe we might be able to get more talent for us to actually compete for. So you definitely had a number of technology leaders who came together to try and marshal those resources and be able to maximize the impact. But it's still very difficult. It's very difficult to get into schools. Schools' curriculum and timetables are very busy. And whenever you look to interact with schools, they all want it to be at the same time of the year because that's where it fits in terms of their academic calendar. And you just can't do it because there's only so many kids that you can bring into your school, into your workplace at any one time from these schools. So you have all the best of intentions, but you can't maximize the impact because the schools just can't interact with you in the way that they're set up in that kind of way as a for instance. So you definitely had a lot of impact. But I have to say, not as much impact as potentially we could have had or indeed wanted to have.
You were there right at the start of Software NI, as it's now known.
Yeah.
You talked about aggregation and working together to reach people you could never reach, even as an Allstate of this world, which is huge in Northern Ireland terms. What was the reason for coming together around that?
So there had previously been a voice of the sector. It was a group that was called Momentum, and in its day, it had been hugely successful. So you've got a nascent technology sector that's getting going, and the group that came together of technology companies, technology leaders. In the early 2000s, Momentum provided a great voice. It kind of came to its end, and there was a hiatus in terms of there being a voice of the sector. All these companies were out there; they were rocking it, being successful. Not enough of that collaboration in terms of coming together, much more ad hoc in its way. These kind of collaborations springing up and then dying away. And a number of technology leaders, myself included, realized that actually if we wanted to get a bit more sustained energy into the system, then we needed to be more purposeful about how we went about it. So a number of us came together and put in place, essentially a successor organization to Momentum. We called it the Software Alliance to start off with that very particular focus on software, and that has now morphed into what is known as Software NI, and that has been hugely successful. And it's a group that is very heavily subsidized by the larger members of the tech sector in Northern Ireland, but open to all, and that's the way the model is set up. So essentially big subscriptions for the big companies, and then the smaller software companies essentially being able to benefit for very low barriers to entry to that organization, and it has grown really quickly over the 3 years. Running some super programs in terms of like a real focus on skills for the sector, a focus on the access for the software companies here into supply chains to be able to sell the software that is being built, and then also access to cash, and very active in terms of bring in others with the capital into Northern Ireland to actually look at what the sector here is developing. So that approach has proved to be really successful, and that group continues to grow from strength to strength.
Great. Talked a bit about just Northern Ireland being able to, the phrase punch above its weight, and the really brilliant talent pool that we have here. Like, why do you think that is, John? You've travelled across the world, you've seen other places, you're from here, but I think you can be balanced about it as well. Why is it?
Yeah, but I'm also hugely proud of what's being built here and what it is that we deliver from here. Whenever I was leading the tech centre for Citi from here, Citi had 24 of those centres around the world. So I was part of a wider network, so I was able to look in. It was a very privileged position. I was able to look into how others around the globe in North America, South America, Asia, across Europe, how they were running their centres, what help, what support there was in place, what the quality of the work that was coming from them, the levels of productivity. And I can tell you that the centre here was top of the pops. And for me, and you hear this being talked about, but I recognized it really early, what that recipe for success actually is. We are a pretty tiny place whenever it comes down to 2 million people in the wider economy of Northern Ireland. We do have the advantage. Well, some might say it's a disadvantage, but we all do know each other, and we all have that same common aim. In terms of being able to build good jobs here in Northern Ireland. So we've got that real connectivity across that people network in Northern Ireland. And with that then comes really good access into government in terms of being able to have conversations pretty quickly with the right people to make decisions, particularly in technology, which is like a growing sector with a high demand for skills, to be able to have those conversations with those government officials and ministers who can make real decisions to be able to target resources to deliver the skills. The relationships into academia, a super college network, a super pair of universities here delivering really top talent into the sector, being able to get access to those colleges, access to the universities, and talk about the shape of the sector, the trajectory of the sector, the type of skills that we'd be looking to consume. And then that piece around being able to build the relationships across business. Yes, we're all competing for the talent, but we're not really competing in terms of products that we're trying to sell out there. And then that allows us to get into a mode that is much more around co-opetition. We may well be competing, but we're also cooperating in terms of building out the tech sector. And then what has been referred to as the triple helix, bringing those all together in terms of the relationships across business, the access to the universities and colleges, and then the support that you get from government and government agencies. It's a very powerful recipe to be able to get things done, to be able to deliver the quality engineers that then are powering the software sector in Northern Ireland.
There's been a lot said about AI right now. Do you have any thoughts on how it might change the landscape of software talent?
I think you're in the wrong tense when you're saying how it might.
Okay, how is it?
How it is changing. I am hugely excited about the potential for AI, about how it will not just change the sector in terms of how we're delivering the product, but then about how the wider economy, how the technology is going to be harnessed to solve problems that up to now maybe have been more difficult to solve. Back to my earlier comment around, what are the things that make somebody successful in a career? And I said it's about that ability to continuously learn and adopt new skills and new tools. That is so important as we go through this particular revolution. in terms of people getting on board and getting on board now, in terms of thinking about the skills that they're going to need to be successful in the future. People worry about, it's going to be job displacement or job elimination, but it's also going to be about job creation, and we need to be sure that we are best equipped to be able to grab hold of those jobs that will be created out of here. And I myself have been on a real journey of learning. I've been investing my time in terms of acquiring the skills, to be able to use the tools that are there, but also to be thinking about, how are the tools going to evolve. And we've got some real fantastic assets. The quality of the skills coming out of the universities is fantastic in terms of what they're teaching and getting people to think about AI. But we also have got real assets in terms of the AI Collaboration Center that is doing super work out there, which is dealing with businesses predominantly in the SME part of the economy, and getting them to think about what AI could do for their businesses, and then helping them to build the prototypes, helping them to realize their concepts, and then ultimately get them set up for success. So AI is changing the way that we're thinking about software, is thinking about changing the way that we think about how technology powers our business, and we all need to be getting ourselves engaged in that to make sure that we continue to be relevant out into the future.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the downsides, and one of the things that I heard was a software business saying that some of the roles and tasks that interns, early talent might have done, we're now getting our existing staff to potentially do some of those things with AI. And is that an unintended consequence that we almost raise the ladder up a little bit too far in terms of entry level, so that lots of people in our society who don't have qualifications or are coming in at that junior level, that they're not able to use the tools in a way? It almost needs a level of expertise to harness the tools. You see that having an unintended consequence?
I do worry about the digital divide. It's one of the things through COVID that was writ large. I do a lot of work with a group called Business in the Community, and one of the things that was identified, and we saw it whenever kids were looking to participate in the homeschooling, that not everybody out there is connected up to fiber broadband. Not everybody out there has got bundles of data on their phones to be able to connect. Not everybody has got a plethora of devices lying around the home, and I do worry about that in terms of a divide. And what you're talking about there is people being able to access and be able to participate. I do also worry about our grads coming out of the universities and colleges, because they're super bright and they'll make that leap, to what you call the ladder that's maybe a bit higher up. Yes, it might be a bit more difficult, but my experience of the way that the younger generation are using technology, I'm not too worried about that. What I am worried about is making sure that we are making technology available, making the digital skills available, so that everybody's going to be able to participate in the economy of the future. And that's definitely something that preoccupies me.
And you're now in a couple of roles that are probably, say, non-executive. Invest NI being one of those. What was the reason for you going for that role?
So I have had a super executive career, absolutely fantastic. And in terms of where I've ended up running, two of the largest foreign direct investment companies in Northern Ireland, Citi and Allstate, 30 odd years ago, whenever I was, thinking about what am I going to do in my life, I never would have pictured that that's where I would end up, so I got to a point, and probably was post-COVID. I hated COVID. I found it a very difficult time. Essentially running a 2,500 person organization from my attic, very draining. Climbing up into the attic, early in the morning, doing all your stuff with your local teams here, and then connecting on to to deal with all the American business. You talk all day. You'd be on these big groups, and then you get to 6-7 o'clock at night. You'd switch off, and you'd realize you're all by yourself. I found it very isolating, and definitely made me think about, well, what do I really want to do? So coming off the back of COVID, I made a decision that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to take my career in a different kind of direction. And for me, that was around building up a bit of diversity, a bit of variety into how I spend my time. And that naturally has led to a portfolio career. I'd always had a big interest in terms of economic development. I talked about that arc of whenever I first came out of university, there was nothing here, to now a place where we've got a thriving technology sector in Northern Ireland. And Invest in I has been a massive component of that success. The vision of that organisation around the investments that it has brought into Northern Ireland, the skills base that it has helped to deliver. I've been part of that, and I've seen it from one side of it. And whenever the opportunity came up in terms of joining the board and taking on the role as chair of that board, for me that was a very natural progression. That was something that I wanted to do, and to be in a position, a leadership position, to be able to continue the development, not just of the tech sector, but of the economy in Northern Ireland as a whole. So I've had that role for just over a year now, and it's a very challenging role. It's a very complex role, but it's a very fulfilling, very satisfying role, and certainly helps me to bounce out of bed on a Monday morning as I go in and think about what can I do today from this seat in terms of making sure that the economy here in Northern Ireland is as strong and as well placed to be able to maximise the opportunities that present themselves. And then alongside that, of taking my core in terms of technology and that understanding of how technology can solve business problems, and then bringing that to bear in the boardroom of other organisations as well, and having a really good time doing that.
Yeah, it's great. Great. Well, we're very, I've spoken to a lot of people, and very glad that you're in that role in Invest in I. You know how it all fits together, John. And last question, really, we've talked a lot about things that are good about work. Right throughout this, we know work that is good for us and the impact we can have. So our last question is, what for you, John, if you were to sum it up, what's so good about work?
What a difficult question to answer, because some people go, oh, work, couldn't be having it. I've always enjoyed my work. Maybe I've always done work that energizes me. I had a really deep and meaningful realization about work quite early in my career. My wife, Christine, is a medic, and whenever we were in London, she worked in the hospital in London, and we used to go out for out round Hampstead Heath for walks. We lived in North London, and we were out on a walk some Sunday afternoon, and this lady hurpled up on a stick to Christine in the middle of a busy park in London, stopped her and said, "Thank you for what you did for my husband." And that really struck me, because Christine was doing a great job, but I love my job too. And why is nobody coming up to me and saying thanks for that line of code that you wrote? It was really great. But what that said to me is that there's a hierarchy of needs in terms of the world of work, and I've always thought that the value in the work that I did was in terms of creating the wealth that then allowed for the provision of other services in society. And while nobody is ever overtly coming up to me and saying thank you, I get great satisfaction out of knowing that the businesses that I've run provide good jobs that pay well, that are really satisfying and really challenging, and are meaningful in terms of making a difference in people's lives. The job that I have at Invest in I gives me great satisfaction, because I know that I'm helping support the creation of those wealth creating businesses that provide the taxation that then provides for all the services that we all consume. And, for me, that's what the motivation is. It's about, the difference that I can make from whatever seat that I'm sitting in terms of making here a better place for us all to live and to have our families and to, have our businesses and work.
Yeah. John, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Workplus. If today's story gave you fresh perspective or helped you rethink what's possible, leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform or hit like and subscribe. It really does make a big difference. For more stories, resources, and tools to help guide the next generation, visit workplus.app. Until next time.